Brad Wenstrup, Congressman, been at it for about 10 years or so. He's on the Intelligence Committee. He's also on Ways and Means, but most importantly, he's on the chair of the Select Committee on the Pandemic and our response to it. And Congressman Brad Wenstrup, welcome again to the Bill Cunningham Show. So much to cover, so little time. Let's talk about the report out of the Biden White House about what a great job Biden did when it comes to Afghanistan. So many different elements. One is, of course, we left behind thousands of our closest friends. Two, the policies got 13 Marines killed, a couple dozen more mortally wounded. Three, we turned over billions of dollars of our materials to the Taliban. They're now marching around with our stuff. And according to the Biden White House, this was a great exit from Afghanistan. And even CBS News isn't buying it, which is telling you exactly how bad it is. But since you're on the Intelligence Committee, talk about what was intended on the Afghan pullout, what really happened, and how this report is a bunch of BS.
Well, the biggest problem with the Biden administration is they withdrew based on a date rather than on terms. And that we did not fulfill our promises to those that helped us in Afghanistan. And the numbers are very large of those that worked with us, gave their lives in many cases, but were promised they could come to America. And worse than that, we left Americans behind. But their report on the failed withdrawal largely blames President Trump, who was out of office for 8 months. And this is just a pattern with this administration, blaming Trump or COVID for everything that they have done wrong. And it enabled the return of the Taliban in Kabul. You know, the goal should have been get Americans out, our allies, and our interpreters out, and then leave. So it was an unquestionable failure. Did those that were sent over there to do the job of getting people out do the best they could? They were unbelievable. And unfortunately, 13 lives were lost. And that's just American lives. There were other lives lost as well. So it was a complete failure. Warnings from the intelligence agencies about the rapid collapse of Afghan forces to the Taliban if we left the way that we did. We saw that. And so we put Americans at risk. We put our translators at risk. Secretary Blinken now says that there's 175 Americans remain in Afghanistan, but the Senate Foreign Relations Committee found as many as 9,000 were left during the Biden administration's withdrawal. So I don't know how many are actually there. Blinken originally claimed 100 to 150. The number keeps changing. And besides that, you know, China and Russia are watching this closely. And when we show weakness on the world stage, you just encourage your adversaries to try and do more. And now we see China's being very aggressive towards Taiwan. Yep. We know about Putin in Ukraine. We've set this up for him in many, many ways, but this denial from this report is really, really shameful, and America's not buying it. No. And now it sounds like even the mainstream networks aren't buying it. No. In a place where they're used to just saying what they want and get away with it.
You know, one of the saddest things I observed was the President of the United States, who's not mentally present, saying forcefully that no one objected to his policy. And then I watched General McKenzie, I watched General Milley, Secretary of Defense Austin, all testify under oath, some before your committee, that talked about we gave different military advice, and they would not talk about the advice they gave to their commander-in-chief, but they said repeatedly we advised against it, and then Biden forcefully lies, flat out lies about what they told him, and he gets away with it somehow. And, of course, impeachment's not a possibility for Biden because of who's the vice president. But can you tell the American people, what did Biden say about the military advice he received, and what was the truth?
Well, he had said that he had offered a few different plans, and they were all rejected. And then one of the things that he said after that was, when he was asked, why didn't you resign then? If you thought it was such a bad plan, why didn't you resign? He said, well, the enlisted don't get to resign. Well, I get that, and that is an important point. But you know what? I don't know. Sometimes leaders have to step up, and if they're going to give an order in a tough situation that they disagree with but feel they have to carry it out, maybe they should go with them. And
no question. I know you and some others have said to Milley, to Austin, to McKenzie, why didn't you resign? Put your rank on the table like a lieutenant colonel did. I've had him on my show, wrote the book. He put his rank on the table and said, you know what? This is a policy that I cannot follow. I cannot take these orders. I quit. but these other ones simply allowed the president to lie. He wasn't under oath, but these three military guys were under oath, and they said, we gave different military advice. Then Biden completely lied about it and kind of got away with it because it dealt with only 13 dead Marines. Also, rules of engagement. There was that one sniper that had the terrorist with the bomb in a scope, and he couldn't get authority to kill him before he set the bomb off because there was no chain of command. No one gave him permission to save those lives. How ridiculous was that?
Yeah, and they trying to say that this was not chaos. Well, I will again say the troops did a great job, but it was chaos. And I can tell you, Bill, I was called in as our Army Reserve surgeon. I was at Walter Reed when the wounded were coming in, taking care of them. And they will tell you it was chaos. And people don't hold on to planes and fall from the sky trying to get out if it's not chaos.
In fact, Biden has said it was a good military operation. His military disagreed. Nothing came of it. Secondly, there's all kind of leaks into social media about the intelligence that we, the American people, are giving to the Ukrainians and to others. And that is a terrible, you're on the Intelligence Committee, a terrible, terrible thing. And this is, again, leaks throughout the Biden administration. And how harmful is it if the Russians, the Chinese, getting ready to invade Taiwan, I imagine, and our enemies, the Iranians, find out through social media leaks what we know. And, of course, the media is spinning it in this country as a great positive because we're telling the Ukrainians what's happening inside Russian army communication inside Ukraine. But what does that do to the future when it comes to the leaks out of this administration?
Well, if certainly you don't want your enemies to figure out how you know the things that you know. But this is really intriguing, and obviously we have to find out more. The New York Times reported there's over 100 documents, and it involves Ukraine, Middle East, and China. The Biden administration saying very little. Maybe they're afraid it's going to rekindle some of the president's malfeasance or misdirection when it came to classified material. But the Pentagon confirmed the leak, and on Thursday they talked about a potential leak, and on Friday the disclosures widened. The question is, were these stolen from within, Bill, or were they hacked from outside? They said that their documents are marked Pentagon Joint Staff. The Pentagon says they're legit but altered. And they're altered in a way, according to them, that they overstate the amount of Ukrainians killed and downplay how many Russians were killed. Now, who would do that? Who would want to do that? And it's a psychological operation, perhaps, because if it's Russia, then it's to try and let the U.S. see that maybe it's not working. Maybe our support isn't so great. It's not really working. Or for the Ukrainians, it's to demoralize them, and for the Russian people themselves, it gives them a sense that they're winning. So this may be disinformation mixed in with real information, if indeed it was altered but legitimate in some ways. And, we need to investigate this. Who had access? And that's the first thing you want to look at. But I don't have any great faith in this. We had leaks come out of the Supreme Court, and there's going to be an investigation. Right. Did we find anybody? And that's a small circuit there, right?
Right.
And, we had investigations associated with the Russian collusion. And there were leaks almost every day. And I go back to when Zero Dark 30 came out about when we got bin Laden. I was in the hearing, and I said to James Clapper, how did Hollywood get all that information about our operations and how we work? And he just casually said leaks. So for too many people, leaks don't seem to matter. But for me, leaks get people killed. And this is a problem if our security is that lax.
Well, the intelligence of Macron came after his meeting with Xi Jinping, and he had big warnings for Taiwan and the U.S. And that was on Friday night and Saturday. He came out and said, having met with Xi Jinping, my God, are we in trouble? Because they've completed now 3 days of encircling the island of Taiwan. We have several U.S. Senators, including Graham, saying that American soldiers will go to fight in Taiwan should they be invaded. The American military needs to get involved. And I would hearken back to this, Congressman Brad Wenstrup, that the reason Taiwan may be invaded by China and the reason that the Ukraine was invaded by Russia, resulting in millions of deaths, have everything to do with Afghanistan, because Putin looked at that and said, you know what? We got a new sheriff in town, and it's Barney Fife. We got Barney Fife, and we don't have Clint Eastwood in the White House anymore. We can do these things. And no one makes that connection. You're on the Intelligence Committee. Do you have a sense that if we had forceful leadership in the White House, we would not have the crises we see right now all over the Middle East and the Far East and the world?
Well, I think, simply put, I think it's certainly worth looking at the notion and the fact, actually, that Putin invaded the Crimea portion of Ukraine under the Obama-Biden administration and then did nothing under the Trump administration, who was actually supplying Ukrainians with a chance to defend themselves. And the Biden-Obama administration just using blankets and MREs. Yeah. And then they invade fully with Biden as president. So I don't think it's coincidental. I like us to be strong, and we can deter through strength. And we've proven that time and time again, but we have let things go under this administration, unfortunately. And the world leaders that seek to do us harm or to weaken us even further are out there just waiting for their chance to pounce. And they're disrupting the whole world order, and I'm afraid it may get worse.
You're chair of the Select Committee on Pandemic. Where it originated, what did we do, and what can we do? I see every now and then more vicious viruses are all over the place. And at this point, God only knows. I think it originated in the lab. I think it was created by the Communist Red Chinese. I think we funded it. We funded the creation. The outbreak began just a few blocks away from the lab itself. Obviously, that's where it came from. We were sold lies about the wet market, whatever that is. Well, what are some of the recent developments? You're the chair of the subcommittee on the pandemic, that we can learn from what did not happen during the last pandemic with another one coming.
Yeah, well, we do 100% across the board bipartisan. People feel that it is important that we get to the origins of COVID, and that's more recent than it was in the past. Everyone seems to be doing that. Both the House and the Senate unanimously passed the bill to declassify what the intelligence communities have on the origins of COVID, and the president signed that into law. So that's going to be declassified, which is going to be a big help. So the mood is changing, and people do want to get to the origins of it. And we're on our way. We have started to have some hearings on that subject, but we're talking about everything to do with the pandemic, the effects on the economy, the effects of lockdowns, and the effects of school closures. And that's one of the things that we did recently. And we were talking about the funds for the elementary and secondary schools. Were they effective? Were they necessary? Were they helpful? Did they diminish harm to the students? How were they affected academically, physically, emotionally? How was the money spent? In 2020, it was $67 billion. The American Rescue Plan added another $122 billion. And then we're finding that they're teaching classes, when they did teach, they're teaching classes that talk about implicit bias training and gender issues. So we sent a letter to the Department of Education Secretary Cordona, and we want all the documents, communications, and policies, and the guiding that went with the funds. We want to know how the money was spent and where was it spent, especially when schools weren't open. We've reached out to Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers, invited to testify. She seems to be willing. But we all said it was essential that kids get in school, but we didn't prioritize the students. They should have been the last to close and the first back in, and instead it was just the opposite. And instead of looking at how to open, it seemed like it was no way to open. And data was coming in. The teachers at first said, we want to be vaccinated. We don't want to go back until we're vaccinated. So as a nation, we made them a priority. And then after they got vaccinated, they said, well, we're not going until the children are. And data was starting to show that children didn't need it unless they had some underlying pathology. Right. And now, just last week, the World Health Organization said kids should not be getting vaccinated. So we've also sent letters to the CDC, the American Federation of Teachers, and these 14 other non-government agencies, such as School Nurse Association, that want the communications between them and the CDC, because it appears that the American Federation of Teachers, a non-medical political union, had the most influence with the CDC when it came to their guidelines for school reopening. And so That's where we are. We're seeking the truth. Honesty is non-negotiable. At the end of the day, what we want from this committee is to possibly be able to predict the next pandemic and prepare for it and protect ourselves and maybe even prevent it. But we can't do it unless we get honest answers from what we know about the virus, the vaccines, and what was done across America and what worked and what didn't work. And it's our oversight responsibility.
I'm glad you're the chair because you care greatly about this issue. You're a doctor. You understand the issue. You have cared for those overseas who have been injured in Iraq, and you're there. And what we have right now is a complete chaos. I can't imagine America going through much worse weeks than we've gone through recently and survived through the spring and the summer. But once again, Brad Wenstrup, you're the chair of the Select Committee on the Pandemic in the House of Representatives, on the Intelligence Committee, and also on the Ways and Means Committee. And thanks again for reporting to the American people what's going on. And God forbid if we should get into a fighting war with the Communist Red Chinese, the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Iranians. I'm not sure where it's going to lead, but that's not good. But Brad Wenstrup, once again, thank you for coming on the Bill Cunningham Show. With your permission, we'll do it again. Thank you, Congressman.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the opportunity.
God.